Thanks everyone for joining here today. On September 13, 2016, we're going to talk about migrating SAP applications to HANA on AWS. I have the pleasure of presenting this information to you. My name is Patrick Osterhaus. I'm President and CTO of Protera Technologies, and we're very excited to share this information about an exciting approach of looking at new ways of how you can migrate your SAP systems to HANA on AWS. So we'll do a quick introduction on Protera for those on that webinar who are not available or aware of the company, what we do, and also then talk a little bit about how companies currently migrate SAP systems going to HANA as well as looking at the cloud. And we'll have a time for a Q&A at the end. So please refrain, and you can ask your questions onto the moderator Q&A board there that's available for the webinar. And through we're going to talk about the migration options, looking at some of the recent announcements about SAP HANA on AWS, and then we're going to look at our new solution, which we released a few months ago at Sapphire 2016, which we call FlexBridge. So a little bit about Protera. You can see here we have many parts which we consider our solution of AppCare on Demand. This is a platform which not only is comprised of our computing resources, but it's also the people that make up our team, the systems that we leverage to provide our solutions for focusing on delivering SAP solutions to our customers, as well as products that integrate to SAP. So you can see many things on the slide here. I won't read them off, but we integrate the public clouds, as well as data centers, physical data centers, which you can see a reference on the bottom. We integrate SAP's suite of tools. Today we're going to focus upon SAP HANA, yet we can talk about any of the other applications that SAP has and solutions around what we're going to talk about today, specifically on migrations. The migrations of those applications also to either physical data centers or in the cloud. And then our certification that we take a lot of pride in is around SAP. So you can see we are one of 6 companies around the world that have 5 certifications from SAP. You can see some of those represented here, as well as we have diligence around audit and certifications around SSA 16. So our customers and our requirements for auditing are stringent, that we have to provide audit results for our processes and looking into the best practices of how we perform our services. And then in the middle, you can see how we could talk about what makes AppCare. And this is the automations. You'll see a little bit about that today in our FlexBridge suite of tools, as well as all the pieces if you talk about a layer of the solution. So that integrates the network processes and the security standards behind that, our monitoring, and all of our solutions that we've built as part of our platform. So we could talk to all those pieces in a lot of detail. We have separate webinars that talk about our products that comprise our AppCare solution. But today we'll focus just about the migration. But I just wanted to show that we have a full solution of product that we can use to deliver our SAP to our customers. So we have a global presence. These are the data centers that we have enabled for SAP services. You can see here in the yellow is our offices around the world. Our headquarters, where I'm at today, is in Chicago, Illinois. We also have offices in Mexico, in Europe, and in India. And then the data centers are pretty much geographically located around the world. So 24/7, close for latency, for having a very close data center to any of our customers as a choice and an option for where they want to put their computing. And this is a better representation of all of our certifications on the bottom here. So you see the 5 certs, which are globally delivered certifications, that 24 follow the sun service model that we provide. We like to think of ourselves as a cloud broker. So this management platform, which I referenced before about AppCare, that provides the full suite of services to provide SAP to customers. So that includes, this is a few things. Obviously, the security is part of it, which I mentioned. We're going to talk today about migrations, but it's also all the automation that you want to take advantage of for cloud. So the provisioning, all the 24/7 support from our help desk, and then also monitoring backups, antivirus, the patching, all those pieces that you want to have in a cloud solution to fully provision and automate and deliver that solution to customers. We provide all that. I should also mention that we've been in business since 1998, so we're coming up on our 18th anniversary here next month. I've been doing SAP for quite a long time, focusing first in a technical area, and then we branched out with AMS services, and then hosting and the cloud services most recently. Our capabilities around it's end-to-end full lifecycle management. So this goes into the architecture, design of a solution for SAP in either physical data centers or in the cloud, so that incorporates the sizing of it, proof of concept systems to test out a new scenario for SAP. And then it also considers the deployment of it. So again, today we'll be talking about migration, yet we've cut our teeth with many implementations, dozens of implementations for many multinational large companies to do their full end-to-end deployments of SAP. And then obviously the testing of those scenarios. So testing that out, again, proof of concept's a perfect way to test out new software, new solutions from SAP, especially around the cloud. And then the deployment into optimizing it to run, the operational aspects. So that is building out all the areas we talked about with the app care solution, the monitoring, the backups, performance tuning, the optimization, and then go live support and making sure that your users are having the best performance that they require, demand from SAP. So we've been doing it for quite a long time with guaranteed SLAs on a monthly subscription for the services. So what I'd like to do now is start to focus upon the topic here today around migrating to HANA on AWS. And this is where we look at what are the requirements from an SAP software perspective. So the first thing we're going to look at is the assessment around that landscape. And so the first thing we recommend a company looks at, and this is typically how it will be done today, is you bring someone on site for a week or two and take a look at all your SAP systems and do an assessment of how ready are they to move to cloud and also to HANA. So we do a migration risk profile, and this considers the versions of the full stack. So this would look at the operating system, the database, the SAP versions. We look at sizing. We look at performance of the system, that's current. We look at network, how users are accessing those systems today, and things would change if, looking at cloud, how we have to look at the networking. And then any other preparations that would be required to move to HANA. You can see those in the bottom. Some cluster tables might need to be converted, as well as there might be some preparations required if the company's system is not at Unicode already. We would identify those and provide a remediation plan for how we would approach that migration. So that's the as is today, how we would typically look at it. So for example, when we look at what kind of system can go to HANA, this is a really good slide that identifies for a business suite. This is specifically around ERP. This is what it would require. And a lot of customers are always surprised to see how back supported SAP provides jumping directly to HANA. You can actually go from 4.6c directly to HANA. For some reason, Enterprise isn't supported, but then it's ECC 5.0, and then the versions of ERP 6.0 and above. So you can see some jumping off points. There's some clarification and some patches that may have to be done. But that would be our responsibility to make sure that we give you a remediation plan of how to get there, to get to SAP HANA, in the cloud from your current system. And then also include the slide here for CRM, SRM, CRM. Same thing, NetWeaver Stack 7.0. Make sure that you have that latest patch, that version, and the stack level may have to be patched. So again, we're going to check that to make sure that you are ready to jump. And then lastly, BW, which is obviously very important and popular for HANA. Again, 7.0 there. And that's really the last slide I'll show you has the versioning. But just wanted to give you an idea. It's a broad brush of systems that can be migrated directly into HANA. So typically that migration assessment is going to take, like I said, 1 to 2 weeks. It's an on-site, visit. Not the best way. And so that's some things that we looked at a couple years ago, knowing that there's going to be a large crush, a large demand for companies looking to go to HANA and move them to cloud. How can we best prepare ourselves for that? So I'm going to take you down a little journey here of each customer environment, the journey of what they're going to look at while they are going to move their compute to HANA and to cloud. And so we'll have some of those considerations shown here on this chart. So when we would talk to a customer and talk about a strategy to go to the cloud into HANA, these are all considerations we would look at. And we'll talk a little bit more in each of these bubbles here in the next few slides. But you can see just from scanning over it here, obviously, the drivers are to reduce the costs, increase agility, get some of the big data advantages, and get the latest developments from SAP, what they've been working on for the last decade. So how can we get there? So very popular choice in the past has been a lift and shift, where you literally would just copy those systems and move them. Now, in the last few years, there's a lot of new technologies that have provided to copy that data. We can do an OSDB migration, which SAP provides the tool set for. Also, we can look at, and I'll go to this next slide here, so it'll change a little bit. We can focus upon the lift and shift by doing backups and restores. So that capability where you would just copy the system, you would back it up even with the online backup, for example. You copy it to tape, and then you ship all those tapes over, and you're going to have an outage of a few days. So it's certainly one option to look at migration, yet there's a huge impairment to the business, and they're going to have a system that's out for at least a couple of days and take it downtime. So certainly better ways to do migrations have come, and that's what we're going to focus upon, those approaches here in this presentation. So some of those better options that we can look at when we do an OSDB migration is to set up the system as a DR scenario, where you would set up that target system in the cloud as a target for DR, so you can replicate it and then decide, the day that you're going to flip it over, you replicate the system over, it's in sync, and then you start using the target system. So that's a very nice approach, minimal downtime. The disadvantage to that approach is that you're literally just, you're doing a lift and shift. You're copying every byte, and you're going to move it all the same over to the target environment. You might be able to change the version of the operating system on the target side. There's some risk involved in that. But for the most part, you're copying what you had in your source and moving it somewhere else. So not a great improvement. But here's some considerations, nonetheless, of things that we have to look at. The sizing still, connectivity, how you're going to do that. So keep these in mind, because what we're looking at is how can we improve this process. So when we look at these new options, SAP provided a few years ago the export-import option. So now we're starting to get the capability where we can do a parallel export and at the same time import that data. So our downtime has dramatically decreased. We could get this down, for a very large system, let's say 6 terabytes, we could get it down to 12 hours. So now we're getting a little better at, lift and shift, but reducing that downtime. So now we get to the present day, and we look at how can we do these OSDB migrations. When we say OSDB, so this would be a change, for example, from Windows operating system into the SUSE operating system for the target, and an Oracle database which ran on Windows over to HANA, which runs on SUSE. So we're doing this operating system database migration, and we're doing a change into cloud at the same time. So now options here on the top are, this first bullet is the classic migration. And that classic migration is known as that export-import. So there is a certain downtime required for that approach. Now, a few years ago, SAP came up with a new tool set called DMO. That's Database Migration Option. And that takes a big step forward using SAP's tools, and it bundles them up, and it reduces the downtime and enables you to do combination of Unicode conversion, the operating system upgrade, the SAP version upgrade, and move to HANA all at one time. So it's a big step forward. You can see all these now considerations here. Again, those assessments, the preparations that have to be done, the sizing, which is a big concern, and then how you're going to get the data over there. So a few years ago, we started this approach of DMO, and we saw still the capability to improve it even beyond that. So that's what we came up with FlexBridge. And I'm going to show you in the next few slides here in a few minutes what that's all about and our approach on it, why it's better. So just to summarize this, we'll look at this slide, and these are our options up to today to summarize those approaches. So the first one here is this system conversion. So you look at basically, what we've talked about to do a copy. You're going to just export that system and import it, and there's going to be a downtime. you do that conversion. The landscape transformation, this is the idea that you're going to put multiple SAP systems into one HANA system. Some companies are looking at that approach where the last 2 decades they had a region for Europe, they had a region for South America, a region for North America. Now they're bringing it into one landscape. So that would get into this landscape transformation. And then this last piece is companies are actually looking at for S4 HANA and HANA to actually do a new reimplementation. So they would do some data management and moving that over, but they're going to move that data, on a new SAP system and reimplement, which it's an option, not the most popular because you're losing all the configuration you built in the system. So before we introduce FlexBridge here in the next few slides, I want to talk about some new developments about AWS to make sure everyone's aware of them that were released a few months ago. And the first one is around the X1 instance. So this is a lot of pent-up demand for this instance size. This goes up to 2 terabytes. So the largest workloads, and I'm going to show you in a moment what that can do for SAPs, is now available for the AWS cloud. The other nice thing that's a really huge benefit of this is that you can multi-tenant HANA. So you could put 2, 4, maybe even 5 systems if they're smaller, all within this one AWS instance. So huge announcement. It's been GA'd, as of it was starting to be released in May and it GA'd around July. So works great. We have many of the instances running already for our customers. So big enabler here for new compute for AWS. And along with that announcement, SUSE Linux has version 12 available, which provides live kernel patching, which is a major announcement, which allows you to minimize your downtime so you can patch the operating system. So that in itself could be an hour outage every quarter. Now you can take those patching, do that with minimal downtime every quarter, so you can keep your systems up to date and compliant with what's required for your audit and certifications. And also some new enablement of HA and DR capabilities, which encourage you to look at. SUSE has really nice channel of webinar material out there for all the new capabilities on it. As I mentioned, here's the sizing, that 135,000 SAPs, that's for that central instance. That's a very large system. So larger systems can be put on that. And I should also mention that there is now a 1 terabyte option just recently available. So that provides a nice middle ground between what was before the 244 gig. Now you can go to a terabyte or the 2 terabyte system. So some really nice options to move HANA compute into AWS. All right, so let's talk a little bit about FlexBridge. Set up the stage a little bit why we wanted to build it. I'll talk a little bit about the features here next. So the FlexBridge solution, as I mentioned, was built around our migration practice. So we have many years of doing migrations, a lot of expertise within SAP installations and implementations. So we saw the need for us to be able to improve this internally of how we can better do migrations and speed up the process and provide an engine that we could, over time, continually improve it. And our hopes was even make itself smarter over time by doing more migrations. It learns errors and how to handle them to do the processing of those migrations even better. So you can see here from the migrations we've done so far, what we've captured for savings and improvements. So reducing the project downtime, timeline, I should say. So there's a start of the project to end of the project, as well as shortening that downtime window, which is critical. Every company wants to make sure that they can reduce the amount of time when the system's not available, over a weekend when they do the migration. How long is it going to take? So we can get that down to a few short hours for even the largest of systems. And then, project cost, obviously with the amount of migration resources required, as well as the timeline being shortened, we can reduce the cost around that. So this slide summarizes the same pieces. It talks about how we go about that. And I mentioned before about this DMO software solution from SAP. What we've done is we've taken the tools of DMO and SUM, which is the installer, and the PAM knowledge base within SAP, which is the product availability matrix. We can take all these disparate data sources from SAP and use those tools and automate the delivery of a migration. So you would still have a migration specialist that's going to be aware of your environment, knows what needs to be executed from your source version to target. The tool, though, will deliver the migration. It'll do that. It will record all errors, and it does a summary of, not only the migration itself, but the pre-migration assessment. So I'll show in the next slide some of the things we capture on that. The migration assessments where we start. So as I mentioned before about the 2-week discovery period, we put that into a few minutes where we execute a program on the customer environment, collects data, and then we send it back to the FlexBridge solution for us to analyze it and provide a report of duration of project, what's going to be required for remediation to get it ready for HANA. So that's all put into the software, in the model of how we're going to deliver the migration itself. So you can see here from a workflow perspective, this would be, you can think of for a high-level project. So the assessment would start off looking at the systems, the infrastructure at that source environment, and then it would look at refining a project plan that we would deliver and work with the customer. This might change due to they want to have, instead of our typical environment, our typical approach, I should say, for migration would be copy a production system and start with that, and then go to dev and do the migration of dev to cloud, and then do production, and then copy production over to quality, and then you'd have that target landscape in cloud. The customer may prefer to do multiple tests of any of the systems, and we certainly would be open to that. So that project plan would obviously change, and that's where we engage the customer to go through our recommendations and adjust as needed. The execution phase is around those migrations. So per system, we would approach each one as, let's say, a week time frame, just as an example's sake. So we would start on a Tuesday, and we would start the migration where it executes and all users can still access the source system. And then around the weekend time, we'd actually do the flip over to the target system. So there's a few minute outage at that moment. So the execution part is for each system. Let's say it'd be a month duration for 4 systems that we're doing. That would be the execution phase. And the error correction is part of doing the testing and the remediation of, after you migrate to cloud, you change the OS, the database, the SAP version. Obviously, we have to do testing. So this is, Protera works with your team to make sure that the system's tested and thoroughly ready for the next phase, moving to dev and then move to production to make sure our migration has been tested thoroughly. And then lastly is the reporting, the summary phase, that we make sure that you have full knowledge of what's been installed and the versions of software that's available, and any accelerators. If you're working with an implementation partner, this would be, for example, BPC for reporting that could be enabled. I want to make sure that all the awareness for that modules within the team and the team's trained. So one example, this is what an assessment report, you can see just from a summary page of what it would be done. Again, it looks at the 360 degree view. So it's going to review the full stack, SAP, operating system database, the versions, looks at technologies, for example, around your network, things that may have to be improved to do the migration. And then we're also going to make some recommendations for what the 2B is going to look like. So make sure that, the options on AWS, you're looking at the newest options from SUSE for HA and for DR. And we have recommendations around that enablement in the report. So it's going to have the recommendation as, from SAP, how to best approach the migration. And another summary piece here for the assessment, just also, any other prep steps, for example, that I'll talk about the Unicode preparation again. That's a big area that if a company hasn't prepared or done the migration to Unicode, that's typically a good week or 2 of work to remediate the system and go through, the environment cycle on those, the development cycle, I should say. So go through dev, remediate dev, then do quality and then production. So just to make sure that we have a good timeline in place so we don't disrupt the project plan. Within the software itself, we have project management. So we can enable workflows to the customer project management team. So they get identification of when we go to a new step in the migration, they get an automatic update of that stage has been reached and the last stage was successful. So they get automated reports, so they don't have to continually check and have as many meetings. We can automate that process so they have full visibility into the project milestones. So what you're seeing here on the slide is this is for a specific system. This is for a development system migration. But you can see for this one system, there's 7 stages of execution. So that workflow would notify if the target, the customer wanted to see all those notifications, they could get a notification on each step. So we have a lot of capabilities here to help improve the communication on status updates for the project. And one of the big pieces that we struggled with on migrations, we're doing these manually, is around the health check. So just to make sure that the source system may have been 100% throttle in the CPU and wasn't running as fast as it could be. So then you would add more compute resources to it. Some of that stuff wasn't obvious to see, especially through an SAP migration. There's many steps. Some are more quiet, some are extremely busy. So how do you optimize to make sure that the migration is running as fast as it can be and that it's always executing? The other problem we've seen in migrations in the past when you're manually doing them is the migration can stop and there's no notification that something needs to be looked at. So we built in this real-time monitor that it checks the health of all the components. You can see through the full stack, for all the process of the application to monitor the migration itself, as well as SAP, the database, the network. It's checking the health of those, as well as making sure any errors are occurring. So once an error would occur, and I'll go to the next step here, it's going to look at this auto error correction, I'm sorry. So what happens is when an error occurs for the first time in FlexBridge and never seen it before, it's going to create a record and it's going to record that, all the information around it. Here's the source system, all the details, and it will record what happened and how it got remediated. The next time it runs into an error, that same error, it's going to automatically provide a solution that migration specialist can automatically enable. So a text comes up to that migration specialist phone, and they can just respond yes or no if they want the auto correction to be applied. So it shortens that downtime period where there's an error and the migration is not running tremendously, as well as we create this tremendous database that we understand all the errors and prevent them as much as possible before we even run the migration. So we have this KBA, this knowledge base, all these articles that the system will automatically search for when there's problems. And then for each migration, you'll see the summary report. So per system, we're going to have this notification of the timing of the modules, how long it took for the migration. This is all information that if we saw dev ran, the system was a little undersized, we can adjust, work with the customer to speed that up for the next system. We can look at some parameters within the migration itself. So there's a lot of knowledge and improvements we can make just looking at the summary report per system. Besides that, there's a migration summary report that will look at all the systems in whole and all the versions that you currently have. So for example, an S4 HANA for 1611, for example, which is coming out very soon, there's a lot of enablements for BPC. So we can spell out in the report what's been lit up, making sure the customer is aware of that new functionality. For example, new reports, new analytics that are available for it. So in summary here on the FlexBridge tool set, we have these advantages. We're reducing costs, again, because of the timeline, not only for the migration itself, but the end-to-end time. So we can accelerate the time that is needed, or the speed of the migration, so we can shorten their end-to-end time, as well as reduce the whole end-to-end project for all the systems. The reducing of risk, comes from many, many aspects. I didn't talk too much about how the data is transferred yet. We have not only security aspects, so the data being encrypted, but data checks on both sides. So we make sure that any data, if there was a failure in the network when data was being transferred, it is automatically reset. These are things that in the manual process, sometimes it won't be caught until the very end where there is an error and you saw it in the import, and then you lose that time, you have to resend the data or re-export. So there's been times where the customer had failures in their export, and then they had to, push them to another weekend because, the data transfer caused an error that they lost the time on, they couldn't recover. So the reduction of risk and the reduction of mistakes being made, bad decisions being made for a migration choice. The reducing of complexity through that knowledge base, and then the increasing of productivity and the visibility into the project itself. So big benefits from the automation. So I'll talk about one of our case studies here. This is an ECC migration. They went from on-premise over to cloud. They went from ECC 6.0 to HANA, and you can see their system was ECC Enhanced with Package 6, Oracle, Windows. They had WWI, their manufacturing company. So they migrated all WWI and ECC to the latest version of SAP running on HANA on SUSE version 12. We saw the improved month-end closing. That's the challenges, that one of the big reasons why they went to HANA, as well as the analytics to be able to provide their business to make faster decisions. They were able to do this migration with the downtime minimized down to 3 hours. When we first talked to them, the expectation when they talked to other vendor was the migration would be 3 days downtime. So with this new approach, using FlexBridge, we were able to minimize not only the project timeline, but the downtime most significantly. So have a few slides here. We have 60-day HANA proof of concept offers. That's from both AWS and SUSE. So that offers the environment as well as an assessment and the operations. So encourage everyone to take a look at those offers. And I would also offer you to come by our booth next week. We're going to be at SAP TechEd. That's at the Venetian. And we also are going to have a appreciation party for our customers that will be on Tuesday night. So feel free, if you are at the event, please stop by our booth as well as our event. We'd love to share a drink with you and any ideas around your migration, and love to see you in person. All right, so I think that's all the slides we have. I think for Q&A, Christian, I don't know if you're on. I had a few questions come through, but if you're able to unmic yourself. Yep. Yep. You're a little faint, but I can hear you.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions actually here. A couple of questions came through concerning what kind of compression rates we have seen in the transition from existing databases to HANA.
Okay. So if everyone, I'll repeat the answer so everyone, or questions so everyone can hear it. The question that came in is, what kind of compression rates did we see when we go from ECC to HANA? And what we've been seeing, which is pretty predictable, is around 40%, you could say. So if you have a 1 terabyte ECC system that's compressed, that would translate to about a 400 gig HANA system. So the compression factor is very large there. If it's compressed, it'll be less, but if it's compressed, or if it's uncompressed, you'll get a larger savings in the footprint. They'll be a lot smaller in HANA.
Another question that came across actually in different forms 3 times. It's about our experience around performance and robustness of the AWS X1 instance.
Okay. Yeah, so far the performance and scalability has been, amazing. No problems we've encountered. The system itself is built around SSD, solid state technology for the storage. It's got the latest i7 version 3 chipset from Intel, which is the latest state-of-the-art compute technology, as well as the networking is 10 gigabit. So we haven't run into any performance issues. With the workloads that we put on AWS with the X1, it's been very good.
just came in. Interesting. It's about the proof of concept. What is typically the lead time that started, and what are the prerequisites?
Okay. The question is, what's the lead time for the POC offer? So what we typically see is a couple weeks from the beginning. What we would start with is to look at the assessment, and that assessment we can deliver. It's an ABAP program that can be run on any SAP system. So that once that's executed, the results are sent back to us, and we can have that report back to you. We want to do it over the phone just so we can discuss the report. Obviously, we give you a copy of it as well, but that usually would take a couple of days to get that meeting set up after we get the report, after we get the results to run the report. And then from that it's literally just setting up the POC, and there's a lot of options around that where we can accelerate it, so we don't have to wait about getting a network, a static permanent network connection. We could make the connection to AWS from any compute environment through a VPN site to site. That would be actually a recommendation. So we accelerate the time to get the connection up and make it as easy as possible for the customer, the company to connect to AWS. And that's something we have a lot of experience in. We're happy to help with. So once we get that, I would say, within a week's time, we could have that. And then beyond that, we provision the new target system, and we have to open a couple ports on the customer network to enable FlexBridge to connect, and we can then start a POC. I should also mention that we would typically recommend to do a POC on a copy system. So this would be a system that's isolated from your production landscape, just so you don't have to worry about the migration, the copy, the test affecting any of your production operations. But we certainly, to get a POC running at most, a week time, and then, do the migration probably a couple, 2 to 3 days. So within 2 weeks, you could have a system up. You're testing your customer data on the cloud in HANA.
Excellent. Another question, can you talk to different options available on AWS for running backups and for running disaster recovery?
Sure. So we had a few on the slides around the options for migration. There's as many options for migration. There's as many options for backups. We ourselves, in our hosting practice, we have for AWS many options that we internally even do for backups. So one would be, you can bring your enterprise software and manage that just like you do for on-premise. You could bring it to the cloud. You could even have your managers, let's say your backup cell manager or your backup software manager, you could have that defined at your data center and still run operations for all these targets for the systems you want to back up. You can do that all in AWS. So it's not hard to extend your current solution, fully manage those backups on-premise still, and manage that to targets in the cloud in AWS. The big thing that would change is the media and what you back up to. We find most popular that we back up to EBS volumes, and that gets into a lot of other discussions of best practices there. The nice thing about when you back up to an EBS volume is you can snapshot it, and this gives you the capability then to do really cool things around retention, storing the data, and how when you don't really offsite it and putting it to a tape, but you would move it to another region in AWS to get the offsiting equivalent. So it's if there's more questions around backup specific, we can certainly do those in more of a deep dive conversation with a customer. Feel free to reach out to us, but I would just summarize it saying there's a lot of options. You can use your enterprise solution you have today. There's other vendors that are doing backup specifically for AWS. Those are certainly good options. The big thing is you still have to have those local backups being executed. So you have to, it's not just, you just do snapshots now and you just take full copies of your whole environment of operating system, but you still have to do local database backups and get those logs, those transaction logs, to make sure you can do point-in-time recoveries. So It's a little different, but it certainly still works. There's some new options. You want to make sure you explore those and take advantage of them in AWS.
Another question, that how do we select the locations for deploying on AWS? Is connection latency an issue? Can you share some experience?
Yeah. So the question was, what are some of the considerations around looking at the AWS regions for where you put your compute? So latency is certainly one of the biggest, concerns. There's also, regulatory. So you may have to locate your data center in a specific country. That's certainly a concern. So AWS has, so many options for which data center to select around the world. That's certainly what's one of the best choices of any cloud provider. Other considerations, latency, like I said. Another big consideration is cost. There, even within the U.S., there's differences in the cost for the compute and storage. Maybe not storage, but I know certainly in cost for compute, there'll be variance between the different regions. So that's something you got to weigh, latency and the location versus the cost for all the resources being in a specific region. Aside from that, in the past, AWS had a little more restrictions on what kind of instances could run in what region, what data center. That seems like that's been negated quite a bit. It seems with the organic growth of all their regions. I can't remember that. Sometimes you'll see when they have a new product like X1, it's only available in a certain region for a very short period of time. But it, like everything else in AWS, all those weaknesses are getting remediated pretty fast. So I'd say at this point, pretty much all data centers, all those regions are created equal, and that's not really a concern anymore.
At this point, we don't have any other questions. So, there is a question that just came in. What is the difference between FlexBridge and DMO?
Okay. So to repeat the question, it's what is the difference between FlexBridge and DMO? So I would describe the difference as FlexBridge sits on top of DMO. So there's the items that it helps to accelerate migrations is the automation that it builds within the calls to the DMO tool set, the SUM tool set, which is used for installations and upgrades by SAP, and then the integration with PAM. So all those integration, those tool sets, the automation, so the workflow, so that includes the real-time monitor. If there's an error, it's going to automatically put the fix in so you don't have a downtime, as well as notifications of problems. For example, running out of disk space in either the source or target environment, so the intelligence it brings. And lastly, that auto correction, that the machine learning aspect where the tool set continues to get smarter. So it's automating and putting in the best practices and the improvements that we see within our migration, our practice, putting that into software so it's always available for every migration and getting better over time. So I'd say that's the in a summary, that's the difference between FlexBridge and DMO. It doesn't short circuit or replace any SAP tool sets. It just improves upon them.
No more questions,
Just to clarify, that's all the questions?
That's it. No more questions.
All right. Well, with that, thank you. Good questions. Very much appreciate the attention and the time you've given today. And like I said, feel free to reach out to us. You have Christian's contact information in the webinar. And then also, if you're going to be at SAP TechEd, would love to meet you in person next week, especially at our event on Tuesday. And look forward to seeing you. And again, thank you for your time today.